Trump says the Epstein files are a dead issue. Adorable. Because nothing says case closed, like Congress sitting one signature away from forcing a vote, survivors flying to D.C. to demand sunlight, Treasury opening the vault, and 18,000 fresh emails landing like a data meteor. If this is what death looks like, somebody forgot to bury the body. Let's start where the spin collapses under its own weight. Survivors stood on the steps of power and said the quiet thing out loud: stop turning a sex trafficking operation into a partisan chew toy and release the records, protect the victims, unmask the enablers. That's it, not complicated. And what does Trump do? Slaps a dead sticker on a live grenade and hopes you won't notice the pin is missing. Classic Trump. When the house is on fire, he declares victory because the flames match his tie.
Well, President Trump calls it a, quote, dead issue. Lawmakers and survivors are still pushing for the release of all the Epstein files. A bipartisan discharge petition that would force a vote to release the documents is inching closer to having all the 218 signatures it needs. This after a newly sworn-in Democratic Congressman, James Walkinshaw, won his special election in Virginia last week and signed onto the petition, bringing the total number of signatures to 217. And now Congress is preparing to get new information as the Treasury Department says it will fully cooperate and share financial records with the House oversight probe into Epstein. Joining us now is Liz Stein. She is an Epstein survivor and an anti-trafficking advocate and educator. Also with us is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. She's also the host of MSNBC's Can They Do That on YouTube. Liz, we want to start with you. You were really brave and went down with all the other survivors, with Representatives Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna, and you were calling for the release of all of these materials. What is it like to have reached this moment of so much public interest in full transparency and the government stonewalling, the Trump administration stonewalling release?
I think that for the survivors, we have seen this case opened up over and over and over again. And every time we think that it's being put to rest, something else happens. And so I think that our collective disgust, upset with the way that things have been handled really came to a head for all of us. And that's really what prompted us all to meet in Washington, because we felt like nobody was listening to us, but our collective voices were difficult to ignore. And we really hope that we've brought light to this issue in a way that perhaps people haven't seen it in the past.
Lisa, I know that you've had a chance to take a look at the birthday book, which was the center of attention earlier this week. There was a lot of questions and, to some extent, Republicans twisting themselves over to basically say this was not Donald Trump's signature. It doesn't look like his signature. I don't want you to make a judgment call about whether it's his signature or not, but what did you learn from being able to see the book and kind of evaluating it with a critical eye? What questions do you have after looking at that book?
I have a lot of questions about it, but let's start with the Trump of it all, because I'm not a handwriting expert and I don't want to analyze that. I think what came across to me is how very ordinary and pedestrian that letter seems in the course of reading it alongside all of the other letters from Jeffrey Epstein's intimates, his pals in Palm Beach, the scientists that he associated himself with, people in his business life, to a person, this sort of immature, creepy jokes that are made, and what is alleged to be the Trump birthday letter, are made across the entire book. You saw last week, for example, the British ambassador to the United States had his own very long submission. He is a person who has been publicly identified as gay for many years. He has a partner. And yet, in his submission, one of the things that he says is that Jeffrey would fly in and out of his various homes, and he would leave his house guests home to entertain, quote unquote, interesting guests. And there is a picture of Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador, with what looks to be a servant in the house whose face is blacked out, and then a very, very young woman who is in a state of undress, also whose face is redacted. That shows me that irrespective of whether people participated directly in the trafficking, the culture of facilitation and neglect that surrounded Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell goes much further than the president himself and extends to lots of people you and I would consider reputable titans of industry, of academia, etc.
Meanwhile, reality is busy refusing to cooperate with the PR. A newly sworn-in Democrat pushes the discharge petition to 217 signatures, one short of the magic number to yank this out of leadership's hiding place and onto the floor. You can hear the marble hallways sweating. And right as that happens, Treasury says, "Sure, we'll hand over the financials." Translation: the paper trail is about to get legs. You can bluff a press conference, you can't bluff wire transfers. And then there's the birthday book, the scrapbook that makes polite society look like a frat basement with a private jet. Everyone fixated on one inscription that Trump says isn't his. Fine, hire the handwriting nerds, knock yourselves out. But the bigger picture is the rot around it, the jokey tone, the wink-wink nods, the boys will be boys, permissiveness orbiting a predator. It reads like a yearbook for people whose moral development stalled at smirk. Whether or not that one message is his, the vibe is the confession. Now, let's talk emails. 18,000 of them. Not rumor, raw correspondence that keeps puncturing Ghislaine Maxwell's who me routine. If you ever wondered how a monster kept his calendar full, those threads show you the concierge desk. You see the cultivation, the introductions, the smoothing over. The lesson isn't just who wrote what, it's how many knew enough and chose the politically convenient amount of amnesia. And when someone finally asks, "So who helped?" the answer keeps coming back the same. More people than your favorite awards gala can seat. Quick pit stop for the culture. The survivors are done with our selective outrage. They're done watching powerful men treat this like a Halloween costume, throw on a solemn face, mumble thoughts and prayers, then sprint to cable news to turn victims into props. They're done watching respectable names act shocked again while the receipts age in a drawer. The ask is simple: sunlight. Now, with redactions only to shield the people hurt, not the people who profited. And since I know some of you came here for the roast, yeah, I'm talking to you, dead issue guy, let me oblige. Calling transparency dead when the House is one pen stroke away is like bragging you beat the traffic while you're sitting in it. And the "it's a hoax" chorus? You can't chant witch hunt at your own filing cabinet. If nothing's there, why are you trying to padlock the drawer? We can all see you wrestling the handle, big fella. Now let's stitch this together. Petition at 217 means the House is on the verge of a roll call where everyone has to put their name on the record. No more winking from the cheap seats. Treasury's cooperation means the money is about to talk in complete sentences. The emails mean we're not relying on memoirs and selective memory. We've got time-stamped, time-stained reality. And the birthday book, that's the cultural x-ray. Jokes about interesting guests, a vibe of entitlement, a social circle that treated exploitation like ambiance. Not every person in the book is a criminal. But the book itself is a museum exhibit for how power excuses itself. And I'm going to say the part that gets me hate mail. If your first instinct is to worry about reputations, you're telling on yourself. Reputations will be fine. Therapy bills are forever. The only people who fear daylight are the ones who got sunburned doing the wrong thing.
Liz, as a survivor, what is it like for you to, as we've received all these new revelations week after week, to hear people in powerful positions, high-profile officials say that this is all a hoax at times, to dismiss some of the physical evidence that colleagues like Lisa have had the opportunity to pore over. When you hear people speak about this case in that way, what impact does that have on you personally?
I think that's something we should all really remember in this country, is that this is a crime. It's a crime of sex trafficking, and it's being politicized in a way that it really shouldn't be. This is not a political issue. This case has been going on for 5 administrations, and we're really losing focus by turning it into something that it's not. Strip away the people in power, strip away the famous names of the people involved, and look at this for what this is. This was a sex trafficking operation. And if we had a crime, if any of us had a crime happen in our communities that had 1,000 victims, young women and girls, how could we sit and not be screaming at the top of our lungs for justice. We just wouldn't be. And so I think that what I would really ask the American public to do is to refocus on what we're looking at and to not be blinded by the politicians who are trying to make this into a political issue when it's not.
Are there things that you saw in, for example, the birthday book and the images that have come from that unlocked anything for you?
It really validated to me the culture of enabling that Epstein's world was. It really showed to the public the way that the people he surrounded himself with behaved, regarded him, and enabled him to just, this was not a joke that he was interested in young women, but a lot of the commentary in this birthday book was jovial and lighthearted about what happened. Whether the people who wrote in the birthday book were directly involved in the sex trafficking scheme or not, it's really a culture of permissiveness that is just unacceptable.
Can I ask you, Lisa, about the emails? Bloomberg had some very important emails this week that kind of reinforced the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. How important is that trove of emails to lawmakers and others pursuing justice on behalf of victims? To some extent, she's already convicted as a sex trafficker. She's serving time in prison. Yep. But what does this new trove of emails do?
Well, first of all, we don't know whether they're new, for example, to the Department of Justice. Right. These were 18,000 emails from Jeffrey Epstein's Yahoo account. And we know that others of his emails were available to Department of Justice investigators and in civil litigation because we've seen them as exhibits. But let's go back to your original question. How important are they to investigators? I should say, how important should they be to the Department of Justice now? Because they prove in many instances that when Ghislaine Maxwell sat down with Todd Blanche for that 2-day interview, she lied to him repeatedly. We have an email, for example, that's excerpted in the article. It shows Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein talking about which of 2 crimes he should plead guilty to and which one she prefers. And yet, she told Todd Blanche that she was not involved in his criminal case, the one in Florida, whatsoever. She was not a part of it. This puts the lie to that. So I ask anybody who is compelled by some of the things that Ghislaine Maxwell said to Todd Blanche, not only should you remember that she was charged with perjury, but you should remember why. It's because she has a tendency to say the sort of self-serving things that she did to him when the record evidence, again and again, proves otherwise.
By the way, a word to the Senate purists who clutched their pearls and blocked the last release push on procedure. Spare me. Survivors are not a scheduling conflict. Don't tell me you support transparency and then vote to keep the blinds shut because the curtain rod wasn't filed in triplicate. You can fix a process. You don't unring a decade of silence. Here's where this goes if the House crosses 218. You get a clock. You get releases. Sequence to protect victims, yes, but no more endless ongoing matter black holes. You get bank records and email matchups and names that have lived too long as whispers. And you get clarity on the oldest question in every dirty story. Who paid for the plane? Who booked the room? Who thought the rules were for other people? And because this is my channel and not state TV, I'm going to say the other part out loud. This is not left versus right. It's sunlight versus rot. You can be a Republican and want the files out. You can be a Democrat and be embarrassed by what's inside. Good. Be embarrassed, then be better. The only truly partisan position here is hide it. Because I want you in this fight, not just watching it. If you're here for receipts over rhetoric, hit subscribe and tell me your city down below. I'm shouting out a few of you next episode. In the comments, tell me which should drop first once the pipeline opens. Flight logs, financials, visitor logs, or the rest of the emails, and why. Smartest take gets pinned. Back to the story. Liz Stein and the other survivors put it perfectly. Strip away the celebrity, the titles, the donor lists, and look at the thing for what it is. A sex trafficking machine that exploited girls and young women, while prestige circles treated proximity as prestige itself. If your instinct is to say, not all rich people, congratulations. You passed kindergarten. The point isn't all, the point is enough. Enough to create a culture where the powerful kept pretending the smoke was mood lighting.
When, Liz, you mentioned a galvanizing moment among all of the Epstein survivors, and I can't imagine that Ghislaine Maxwell getting the sit down with the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche wasn't that moment. You were so young. You were 21 years old when you met Ghislaine Maxwell at Henry Bendel's. and it started a horrific chain of assault and abuse for you. If you could go back, what would you want your younger self to know? And what would you say to other young men and women out there who might be caught in a similar circumstance?
So this is something that I say publicly because it really comes from my heart. I was just 21, like you said. And although I felt like an adult, I wasn't intellectually. And the shame that came along with this experience was really overwhelming, and I didn't feel like I could tell anyone. And I think that if I could go back to my younger self, I would say, tell someone. And if that person doesn't listen to you, tell someone else, and just keep telling, because someone's going to listen to you. And even if nobody listens to you, be proud of yourself, because you spoke your truth and you stood in your truth despite how uncomfortable it was. And that is a level of strength that is just, I say this a lot, there's no words for that amount of strength in standing in your truth.
So here's the closing truth. Trump can declare the funeral, but the facts haven't RSVP'd. The petition isn't dead, Treasury isn't dead, 18,000 emails aren't dead. Survivors' patience? That's what's dead. And frankly, good. Patience is what predators buy with private jets. If you want this cracked open instead of quietly managed, share this video with one person who still thinks dead issue means don't look. And if you're with the survivors on full release with victim protections, drop a blue heart so I know this crew is wide awake and impossible to gaslight. We don't need more speeches. We need the files. Open the drawer, turn on the lights, and let the truth be as loud as it always should have been.
And remember, if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button.